Are we ready? It works. It's 5 o'clock and you guys are here. That is so awesome. So, and it's because you came to talk about data lakes, right? How many people have a data lake? You already know it all. Where's all the people missing over here? They're the ones that need to learn about the data lake. All right. I'm Chuck Yarbrough with Pentaho, and it's a real pleasure to be here, even at 5 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. And you know what? There's another presentation after me, so I didn't actually have the worst spot, maybe the second to worst. We're going to talk about data lakes. And first, we're going to talk a little bit about why would you have a data lake, and it sounds like a lot of you already probably have better ideas than I, but we'll talk about them anyways. We're going to then talk about the 5 keys to a killer data lake. How many have a killer data lake? Oh, that's why you're here. All right, well, good. Hopefully there'll be something that you can take from this. And then last, if I can get that to go, there we go. What do you need to do? Right? How do you get from data lake to killer data lake? All right. So, maybe it's batteries are running out. When I talk about a data lake, I talk about the data lake that is clear, clean, pristine water that I could jump into and enjoy. How many people have a data lake that feels like that? Nobody raises their hands. All right, well, maybe we can give you some ideas to help with that. Do I need to do anything? I think so. Just start using it. Thank you. We'll see. So, why do we have a data lake? There's probably a million reasons. It's really nice to have one place where I can put all my data. How many people started with a data warehouse? Oh, not that many. That's interesting. When one of the things that I'm seeing, and certainly my customers that I mentioned, I'm with Pentaho. Pentaho is big data integration analytics vendor. And we are seeing a rapid adoption of big data technologies for Internet of Things type of use cases. Anybody here doing IoT applications? Anybody else thinking about IoT? Okay, next question. I'm going to repeat it, and everybody's going to raise their hand. Anybody thinking about IoT? Yes, much better. Really, what's great about IoT is it's an evolution of, and it's based on big data technologies. That's what's enabling it. But IoT is driving complexity, data demands, anything you can think of that makes things harder, IoT probably is driving that. All right, so what do we get from a data lake? The thing I hear people talk about all the time, if you can read that, is more accurate intelligence. Okay, I'm not going to argue that. That makes sense, right? But that's not really what we need out of a data lake. What we need, what we expect, is an ability to increase revenue, to better understand customers, to streamline operations, reduce costs, right? And to be able to create new products. And then the last one is probably the most important. And if you don't understand this, I think you really need to dig in a little deeper. It's the opportunity to literally transform your business. And that's where the hype that's around data lakes and big data in general really is. It's the ability to transform your business. Now, the bad news There's no easy button. How many of you would say building a data lake is easy? Okay. Would you say it's easy to get data into a big data store? I see some heads nodding. Like, and for today's discussion, I'm really thinking of of data lake and a big data store as Hadoop. That's what most of the people I'm talking to are doing. It's not a requirement, but that's what I'm seeing. How easy is it to get data into Hadoop? Like, it's not that hard. I'll bet most of you guys have 15 different ways of getting data from something into Hadoop. You can get it in there. The problem, and I'm to blame for this, like as much as anybody else, because when big data came along and we started looking at it, I'm an old data warehouse guy. I was like, hey, this is fantastic. I can grab all this data, I can load it in the truck, and I can take the truck, back the truck up and do what? I'm gonna dump it. Okay, it's great, right? I mean, it's really good. The problem is there is no easy button, right? It just doesn't exist. So when you or I do exactly what I said, which is load the data up, drive it to the edge, and dump it, what do you get? You get a dump, right? Now, how many people have a data lake, and it's okay to admit it, that you might describe as a dump or a swamp? Like, I hear people, it's okay, you can admit it. Free, safe zone here, right? The reality is, if you do that, if you just take data and you dump it in, that's what you get. And it's not, that's the reality. So the idea of a killer data lake is to, one, not just dump your data, but understand what's in there. And make sure that the purpose it's there is valid, right? And that you can actually use it. So, all right, let's talk about the 5 keys, and then we'll get into each of these. So first, you might be surprised. Align to your strategy. Understand your corporate strategy. If you're an old BI data warehousing person like me, we've kind of been talking about that a long time because the business has been driving that. But let me tell you, when it comes to a data lake, it's no different. Number 2, have a solid data integration strategy. Number 3, modern big data onboarding process. I'll talk a little more about what that means in a minute. Embrace new data management practices, okay? The things that we did yesterday may not be most appropriate for the future. And then lastly, make sure you're using machine learning, right? This is the year of machine learning. Everybody's talking about machine learning. You better be as well. But not just do machine learning, not just algorithms for algorithm's sake. Make it part of the process. Operationalize those algorithms so you get maximum benefit. All right, so let's talk about number 1, align to key strategic goals. So, 1, you got to understand what they are. That's pretty simple, but a lot of times, let me ask, how many of you that have data lakes come out of IT? Okay, let me reverse it. How many are business? Okay, not very many. So, nothing wrong with being part of IT, but make sure you can tie to the business objectives of the organization. Identify executive leadership and sponsorship. If you don't have that, it's risky at best. You're probably dealing with something that is not going, 1, it's not going to align to strategy, and 2, it's not going to have the support that you're going to need. Number 3, this is a hard one. Recognize when you don't have that alignment. Like, that's a challenge. Like, you think you got it, but maybe not. So recognize that. The last one here, ensure your efforts are aligned with those strategic goals, right? So now you know what it is. You think you're aligned. make sure what you do actually does. Now, I know this sounds like, Management 101, but I can't tell you how many data lakes go off the reservation before they get started because they're not aligned. Okay, so when I talk about it, and I'm fortunate, I get to talk to people all over the place, and a lot of times at the C-level or the boardroom conversations align to one of these three things. Things like business acceleration. What are we doing? How are we improving the business? Number two, how are we saving costs, streamlining operations? Those are big ticket items that they talk about. And then the last one that I'm hearing more and more is security, risk, compliance. Those kinds of issues are being talked about at the boardroom. Okay, but for you and I, what do we need to think about? Like, how do we actually align those? So understanding the sort of the solutions approach to large enterprise organizations is really important. So if you think about business acceleration, I see a lot of organizations talking about things like customer 360, customer churn, right? I mean, these are the solutions that they're trying to, the problems they're trying to resolve. That's what I'm talking about. The data lake is technology, right? To support a business challenge. These are the kinds of challenges you're going to see. Sensor analytics. I'm certainly hearing more on the IoT side of things, but data storage optimization, infrastructure analytics, there's all kinds of things happening to improve efficiencies, right? And in a big data world, offloading traditional data warehouses is still something that people are doing. Okay, so you get the idea. It's understanding what those goals are and how they roll up. Okay? Cool. So, number two, have a solid data integration strategy. Chances are, if you're from a large organization, you've already invested in one or more data integration tool sets, products, okay? But if we really look into what you need to establish for where you're going, one, start out with what I just talked about, aligning back to that strategy. Make sure that your integration strategy works with the corporate strategy. It's got to be able to manage and automate the data pipeline. I love talking about data pipelines. That's literally what happens. Data is constantly flowing through. How can I not only integrate, process, but how can I manage and automate the flow of that data to ensure I get out of it what I need, which is analytics, right? It's the answers or the recommendations or the predictions. Okay, you're probably going to have to modernize your architecture. This might be at a software level, it might be more, but be ready around your data integration strategy, you may have to make some changes. Have an adaptive execution strategy. So of those data lakes, or how many people are working today with Hadoop? How many use MapReduce? How many use Spark? Okay. How many use Flink? Oh, a couple. Okay. My point is, if you're going to have a really good data integration strategy, make sure you can leverage the technology that's most appropriate for the use case you have. So, yesterday we used MapReduce. Today we use Spark. Tomorrow it might be something else. Make sure that the strategy you have in place can adapt to what is the best thing for the time being, and for now and in the future. Sort of that future-proofing. You got to make sure your data's secure, right? Who's the latest hack that we're hearing about in the news? It's bad. Make sure you understand security. And accept that data governance is different than data management. And data governance is different in a big data context than it is or was in more the traditional things. So when we had data governance around data warehouses, our data warehouse is absolutely perfect, right? All the metadata in the data warehouse is well defined. It's well controlled, right? I mean, that's the idea. It doesn't always happen. In a data lake, your level of governance and your level of quality may depend on the actual data you have. Things like social data we may not want to have a high level of quality. We may want to actually know what was said. So anyway, you get the point. All right. And then rethink management, metadata management. Doesn't work in a data lake the way it has maybe traditionally in your organization. I mentioned the data, the analytic data pipeline. Look, data is constantly coming in. Data's flowing sort of left to right. Sometimes it flips back around. But ultimately, there's a process of conforming data, making it available for an analytic process. There's probably a data engineering process that happens, maybe a data prep process that's more business-oriented, blending of data, and then the analytic process. Historically, the analytic process was probably visualizations, right? Well, I like to say, I get a lot of boos sometimes, but I like to say the day of the visualization is dead. It's a little harsh. We still are going to visualize data. But the reality is the value that you get out of your data assets is applying intelligent algorithms that can really do things better than we've ever, think into the future, predict, recommend things. Those are things that are not necessarily new. We just haven't been able to do them as well as we can today for the cost that we can do today. Way cheaper than ever before. And then recognize that as part of the data pipeline, a data lake is only a place, right? It's a part of the pipeline. That data probably comes in. You may land it there. You might leave a copy. That data keeps moving. And understanding that and recognizing how to process that and then how to wrap back around and process that data at scale in the lake is the key to being successful. Okay? Now, I mentioned this before. If you're going to deal with a data pipeline, it's one thing to process data, but it's another to ensure automation all the way along that. And what I mean by automation, and I'll talk about it in a little bit here in the future, or in one of the next slides, is how do we automate things that were traditional IT processes? Maybe building an analytic model. Like, I got a data set, I want to expose it to users so they can interrogate the data, I got to build a model. Well, if we can automate that, we can take a lot of time and cost out of the process. Okay, number 3, establish a big data onboarding strategy. So, filling a data lake can be done in a lot of different ways. I mentioned at the very beginning, there's probably 15, 20, 100 ways to get data in. The problem is, if you just, like I said, dump data into the data lake, you get a dump. So you've got to really be thoughtful about how you're getting data in. How many of you have had users or yourself say, all right, I got a data lake, I have no idea what's in there? Okay, it's okay, you can admit it. Yep, that happens, right? I talked to somebody earlier today, same problem. They're like, yeah, I got a data lake, it's good, but I really don't know what all's in there. Well, there's some things you can do. Let's talk about it. So onboarding processes are not about loading data. It's not just connecting to databases and files and devices. It's about establishing really repeatable processes at scale and, oh, by the way, ensuring a level of governance and control over what's going on. So, okay, let's talk about this for a second. If you think about traditional data integration, whatever you want to call it, ETL process, whatever term you want to use, and you've got data, whether it's, and we'll just use simple examples. I got data in RDBMS, nothing easier to pull data into a data lake than an RDBMS, right? So I'm going to go create an ingest procedure using whatever tool I want. Could be Pentaho. We do that. You map to the relational table. At that point, you create the process, and you say, all right, here's the metadata. Here's the columns that I have. It's simple, right? You could do that same with a CSV. Super easy. Whatever the data source, doesn't really matter. You're going to create that process. Anybody do that today? Doesn't matter what tool. Everybody's going to shake your head. Sure, everybody does that. So the problem is customers at the enterprise level don't have a couple of data sources, right? They have thousands of data sources. I have customers in Europe, here in the US too, that have 8,000 unique, different CSV files. Not just CSV files that are nice, neat CSV files, but some of them don't have column headings, some of them have metadata at the bottom, some of them have no metadata at all. How do you integrate those? Are you expecting somebody, an ETL programmer maybe, to go and build a transformation process for 8,000 of those? That's a challenge, right? That's hard to do. And I'm not even talking about the scale of the data. It's just the scale of the files is a problem. So you gotta be able to have an integration process that is dynamic. So there's this concept of metadata injection. Can you create an integration process that at the time of execution, it will automatically look at the data set, derive the metadata, regardless of whether it's an RDBMS or it's a CSV file, and as long as you can kind of tell it where or how to do the deriving of the metadata, it'll figure it out. That's impressive. So completely disparate files use one data integration process. Now you've gone from having 8,000 ingest procedures to having one, or I don't know, whatever the number is, to support 8,000. That's a significant savings. All right, so number 4, embrace new data management strategies. Let's see if you agree with me on this. I'm going to start with adopt early ingest. Most of you probably do that. Nothing new about that. That's probably what you're going to do. Most people I know, they want to get data into Hadoop as quickly as possible, and then maybe apply some level of processing, transforming, whatever you want to call it, once it's there. But also to be able to do that with adaptive processing. I mentioned that before. That's sort of using the execution engine of choice and not being locked into one. If I build that integration process, it's got to be able to adapt to different things like MapReduce or Spark or whatever. Enable that capture of metadata on ingest. Okay, so we just talked about the big data onboarding process. If I'm deriving metadata, or if I know what the metadata is, well, you know what? You can now capture that metadata and put it somewhere. Okay? You might think about big data catalog, where you can manage that data, understand what's there. That gives you insight into how you can use it later. Stream processing, where it's appropriate. You got to think about that. How many people have use cases today for real time? I know that's an open, a lot. Look at how many, yeah. So apply it where it makes sense. Model on the fly. I mentioned this one before. Look, the value of all your data in the data lake is getting something out of it, right? It's getting the analytics out of it. So oftentimes we have users that say, hey, there's this great data lake. Can I please use it? And you're like, okay, what are you going to do? Put an end user on that data lake? That's probably not a good idea. Somehow you're going to have to take a slice of that and create a data model that the user can then use, think of it as a semantic layer or something, so that they can interact with that data. That's a traditional IT kind of BI thing. Somebody's going to have to look at it, figure out what it is, build the dimensionality, and then give your user that. And that's fine, except for what happens. A week after you've given it to them, the user comes back and says, that was fantastic. Now I need, something different. If you could automate that process, you could allow the user to just say, these are the things I need, boom, go do it, automatically build and deliver. That is transformational for an IT organization. Modernize your data integration infrastructure. The tool you used yesterday may not support the use cases of tomorrow. Recognize that. The reality is if you've invested in data integration at a high level, you probably got a pretty big investment, and you're going to try to use the tools that you've traditionally had. They may not work. Be aware of that. Recognize that. Go for it. Try it. But recognize you may need to change things. Extend data management to all data. What I mean here, we've done a pretty good job of understanding, okay, we've got structured data, and we have whatever you want to call it, less structured, unstructured. The reality, it's some level of structure. But there's also video files that have really no structure, but they have some metadata. Recognize that you need to extend data management to all of that. You've got to be able to track all of that. And then, because you have it, apply analytics to all of that. Otherwise, you're not getting the value. All right, number 5. So apply machine learning algorithms. Really what I mean here is make sure that you can take algorithms that your data scientists probably created. Typically what I see is you've got your data lake, you've got production systems, well-managed, well-oiled, or sort of well-oiled. And then over here, you have your data scientist, or the data science team. And they sort of operate on some of that data. They kind of integrate with that. And what's their purpose? It's to find really interesting insights that will transform your business. The problem is, they're spinning off models, they're doing great work, making big differences for these companies, but how do you take what they're doing and make it part of the overall process? And that's a challenge. So one of the keys to having the killer data lake is to actually enable all the work that the data science team is doing to be operationalized within that data pipeline. So how do we operate? How do we manage and automate all those processes? Allow the data scientists to operate on, and use the technologies of choice. How many data scientists do we have here? All right. Do you use R? What do you use? Okay, Python. So lots of people using Python. Let the data scientists use the tool of choice, but enable those algorithms to be leveraged over time. So let me go into it. So have a way to help the data scientists with the data preparation, because that's always the hardest part. It's been quoted, and I'm not going to dispute it, that data prep is probably 80% of the process, just getting the data right. Got to enable them to engineer the features, get the data exactly the way they need it, to train, test, and tune models in some level of production process, and then to enable those to get operationalized, to actually be deployed as part of the overall process, and allow updates to those. So, just as an example, we have a customer that is a large taxing organization in Europe. And they built a data lake, and I'm just going to give you an example of how they might use it. architecturally, but they've got data coming from all kinds of sources, including a whole bunch of data warehouses that that they're actually in the process of decommissioning. Now, I'm not a big proponent of doing away with data warehouses. I think if you've already invested in that, you should leverage that, but there is a balance, right? So they, using Pentaho data integration, they ingest data at scale, process it, and literally spin off analytic data marts for that whole interactive process. So I'm running out of time. I'm just going to explain this one really quick before I get the hook. So why did they do this? This is the point that I've made in the very first key, aligned to the corporate strategy. Why did they do this? Because they missed 34 billion pounds of revenue to them, taxation. That's a lot of money. Like, they needed that. So some of the benefits, they got a 360-degree view of the taxpayer. That's good. I think an example, that very bottom point, that bottom bullet, new reports save an estimated 900 man-hours because what they had before is they literally had to pay consultants to go and spin off reports, just the way that they had designed their solution. They brought all of this together in a cohesive data lake and enabled a huge savings. So key takeaways, I know I'm running out of time, really quick. Align with those corporate strategies. We talked about that at the beginning. Embrace new data management strategies. Enable adaptive execution, right? Be able to have flexibility. Automation and flexibility are key. And then drive the adoption of machine learning. I said it before, this is the year of machine learning. Those that get it right are gonna win. And that's the opportunity that we all have to take back to our enterprises to make sure we do that. So with that, I don't know if we have time for questions. We do have some time for questions. So feel free. Any questions? Right here, there's a microphone coming.
So this slide deck will be available for us to download?
It will.
Okay.
It will. I think we're probably
2 to 3 weeks. 2 to 3 weeks, all this will be available.
Yeah, and I might sneak it out a little bit early. So I may post it on my LinkedIn. I'll make sure you guys know about it.
Anybody? Questions?
It's it's like 5:30. It's dinner time.
It's happy
and adult
hour.
Beverages.
Happy
so.
hour. But there's still one session left.
Oh yeah,
Anybody?
and stick around for the next session. I don't know who it is.
Yeah, maybe.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.